As Korg are marketing it, the king of workstations is back. The Korg Kronos 3 has launched at NAMM. So unless you've been hiding under a rock for the last couple of weeks, and especially because the weekend that I'm recording this, NAMM 2025 is happening in California, there have been a number of announcements, and there will be another video talking about some of the other announcements, but this video is concentrating on the announcement that started about a week or so before NAMM and continued into NAMM, that the Kronos was back. And Korg have launched it and called it, funny enough, the Kronos 3. And in the weeks, or probably the last 7 days leading up to NAMM, maybe 10 days leading up to NAMM, the socials lit up with Korg making the announcement that the Kronos was back in the form of this Kronos 3. The Korg endorsed musicians have started now showing up on YouTube as being introduced to the Korg Kronos 3. And the commentators and influencers who are attending NAMM have started posting videos looking at the Korg stand and the fact that this nice shiny new Korg Kronos is sitting there waiting to be played. Of course, the question is that Korg have not answered is this a response to the negative market sentiment and recent price drops on the Nautilus platform? Nautilus has not been well received. We all know that. It's common knowledge across the industry. To the point that Korg launched a new Nautilus last year called the AT, putting Aftertouch back on the platform. But even that hasn't been enough to kind of stem the negative press from the platform. In the UK, at the moment, you can buy a Korg Nautilus AT 88 key with the RH3 keyboard should I say, for sub £2,000 on some of the portals. Given that this is a £3,000 flagship keyboard, that price tells us something. Remember, like, comment, subscribe to the channel. Go over to Instagram and follow me there. Go over to Facebook, follow me there. That's where the normal notices are. And consider becoming a Patreon. But why have they called it the Korg Kronos 3? Well, to be frank, if I were to turn around to this keyboard behind me where my mascots are sitting, and I were to take off these brown side panels and put black side panels on, then I think I would have a Korg Kronos 3 in looks, but maybe not in performance. Yes, that is a little flippant, but it's not far from the truth. Yes, the new keyboard does boast some upgrades, but essentially it is an upgrade to this keyboard that sits behind me. And in the natural order of things, if you do an upgrade to a product line, then you call it the next increment. They could have used Roman numerals and called it the Korg Kronos III, but they've called it the Korg Kronos 3, given that this is the Korg Kronos 2. But what do we actually know about the Kronos 3? Now, I already commented on the aesthetics of the Korg Kronos. As I said above, if you take all three models of the Kronos 2, you take off the side panels that are currently on them, you put on the new black side panels with the nice little dovetail feature on the at the bottom, and voila, you effectively have a Korg Kronos 3 in looks. This leads me to an interesting observation, which is if it's that close in looks from a 2 to a 3, do we need to be careful going forward with those unscrupulous people who prey on the social networks, with them buying up second-hand Kronos 2s, because obviously the Kronos 2 value will now drop on the second-hand market because there's now a 3, and effectively putting on side panels and trying to pass the 2s off as a 3. To quote the Bard, for those who don't know, that's William Shakespeare, to 64-bit or not to 64-bit? Is that a question we should be asking? I, like many other Korg Kronos users, was hoping that the Kronos lineage would be carried on by a machine that moved the architecture up to 64-bit. Alas, this seems not to be the case. The new Kronos is based effectively on the same 32-bit architecture as the Kronos 2 and the variants of the Kronos 2, the Platinum, the Titanium, etc., that came thereafter. Korg have stated that the Kronos 3 will have an upgraded operating system which the older versions will be capable of running when the actual platform is released. This is both positive and negative in my view. Positive because we know the current operating system on the Kronos platform works well. Negative because the upgrade may introduce instabilities into a platform that actually has been stable for a good 10 years. But I think more positive than negative on this area. However, while the 32-bit environment of the Kronos can compete with the other major platforms that are out there in the market, and you know which ones I'm talking about, some of the newer features of the other platforms require a little bit more horsepower, more memory, and more processing power. This is easier to achieve on a 64-bit architecture than it would be on a 32-bit architecture. Even though the architecture hasn't been updated, Korg claim that they have re-engineered the operating system code to improve startup time by 60%, a feature that I feel will be welcomed by gigging musicians who take the Kronos 3 platform to replace their aging Kronos 2 platform. User interface. Now, I've seen some portals say that the interface is 8 inches and other portals say the interface is 7.5 inches. I've measured my Kronos 2 and I can tell you that the interface between the plastic on one side and the plastic on the other side on the diagonal is just over 7.5 inches, so maybe if you take the surrounds off it is an 8-inch display. But just to be careful, I think it is the same size, or I believe it is the same size. As opposed to, of course, what they did with the Nautilus, which they actually put a slightly smaller display on. Of course, there was a marketing thing that, it was a better display, blah, 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 blah. But it is smaller than the display on the Korg Kronos. However, the new display on the Korg Kronos 3 will be an up-to-date piece of hardware. So this is not the same display as that is on the Korg Kronos 2, but an up-to-date equivalent on the next generation platform. Korg have stated that they've upgraded the user experience. I think that actually means they tweaked the interface, to be honest. The statement says faster and more responsive, but of course that could also be down to the fact that inside this new Korg Kronos 3 they've had to put new hardware. Come on to that in a minute. They've also made the statement offering at-a-glance access to vital information. The only real statement I can see to actually reinforce what they actually mean by this is there is a statement that says setlist mode has been changed to provide the musician with all the information they need through a song or a set. What does that mean? Don't know. And they've also mentioned this touch drag mode to allow parameters to faster but more easily controlled. What does that mean? Don't know. Maybe some of the videos from NAMM and some of the sponsored musicians that are obviously going to start hitting YouTube in the coming weeks will explain those two, because the statements don't make a lot of sense, I have to be honest. Come on to storage. This is another feature that they've said they've made changes. The Kronos 2 of course came with a 30 gig SSD, but you could put two in, so you could actually have 60 gigs of SSD storage in your Kronos 2. The new Kronos 3 comes with 62 gig SSD, and of course still retains the 2 factor, so you could put another 62 gig and get yourself 124 gigs of storage, which is an improvement. Doesn't increase the load time, but it's an improvement. They've also stated that this 62 gig hard drive is preloaded with 21 gigs of waveform data, which means that you've got about 40 gigs of capacity on this new drive. And that's all they've said about storage. Again, as I said in a previous segment in this video, the hardware on the previous Kronos 2 went end of life several years ago. And although Korg have not explicitly stated this, the new hardware in the Korg Kronos 3 has to be an upgraded version of the hardware that's currently in this Kronos 2. It will naturally therefore run quicker. But more importantly, it is supportable. Unlike Nautilus, they've gone back to the 3 model architecture of the original Kronos lineage. So in Kronos 2 you got an 88 key, a 73 key and a 61 key. In Kronos 3 you're going to get exactly the same. You're going to get an 88 key RH3 weighted hammer action keyboard, the 73 key RH3 weighted hammer action keyboard, and the 61 key natural touch semi-weighted action keyboard. So there are going to be 3 models, 2 of which are hammer action, 1 is synth action. Unlike the Nautilus, this Kronos 3 launches with both aftertouch, which was stripped out of the Nautilus and then reintroduced in the 80 model last year, and Karma, which was taken away from the Nautilus completely and has been brought back in. Now I think it's been brought back in, to be honest, because the operating system that is installed on the new Kronos 3 is an upgrade to the operating system on the Kronos 2, and built into that operating system is Karma. But of course what everyone wants to know is, what does it sound like? Well, if you've heard the Kronos 2, you've heard the Kronos 3, because it still has the same 9 sound engines that the Kronos was launched with. These have been retained, there have been some tweaks, so I understand, but they pretty much appear identical to what you're used to if you've seen or played a previous version of the Kronos. In addition to the sound engines to create your own custom sounds, Korg have preloaded an additional 256 programs over those available on the previous Kronos 2. These new programs on the Kronos 3 include the Italian Grand and the Tyne EP1, plus a number of other FM and other EP pianos, so effectively reinforcing the piano section of the Kronos, which, to be honest, wasn't bad. I know a lot of people have said, there are better ones, but if you want a multi-function keyboard, the Kronos isn't bad. They've also stated that they will put the following sound packs into the new keyboard. And that is the KRS-8 Best of Triton, KRS-4 Pros and Splits and Layers, KRS-05 Ensemble Combinations, the KRS-06 and KRS-06B, which are the CX3 signature sounds. So effectively they've given you a lot more sonic reinforcement there, and the CX3 of course giving you a number of new organ sounds for those classic playback instances. Now, as I said, unlike the launch of the Korg Nautilus, where you couldn't transfer your sounds from your Kronos to your Nautilus, which I think was a major faux pas by Korg at the time, because the Korg Kronos 3 is effectively a Korg Kronos, all the sounds that you made on your previous Korg Kronos 1/X and Korg Kronos 2 can be imported onto the new operating system. Now there are subtle differences between the 1 and the X and the 2, but the Korg Kronos, not Nautilus, 3 has been coded to sort those issues out when you load the sounds in. It is fully compatible, is the statement from Korg. Now, the other thing Korg have stated is that they will be releasing sound packs at the same time as they release the Kronos 3 in mid-2025. That will allow all the new sounds that have been loaded onto Kronos 3, which you get as part of the package, to be bought and loaded onto the older versions of the Kronos. So specifically the Kronos 2, the 1 and the X, which means that you effectively have no sonic difference between these older machines and the Kronos 3, but it will come at a cost, and I suspect that cost will not be cheap. So what's this going to cost me? Actually, surprisingly, they've been really quite reasonable in pricing the new Korg Kronos 3. Unlike the competition, who are pitching their workstations closer to £5,000, that's £5,000 in the UK, I don't know what that is translated into America. In the UK, the 88 key model is pitched at around £3,200, the 73 key model £2,950, and the 61 key £2,650. That is a considerable amount less than the competition at the moment. So do we think that is a deliberate ploy to get people back on the platform? You make your own decision on that one. So if this is not a massive upgrade to the Korg Kronos platform, who is this workstation aimed at? These are my views, not those of Korg. Firstly, any musician that relies on the Korg Kronos platform to earn a living will be looking at this platform to provide them with some resilience. That's my view. A keyboard they can use and be confident they can get spares for, which many Korg Kronos users at the moment are fearful of. Maybe this also means they will be able to get access to spares for the Kronos 2s that are now considered unserviceable due to the lack of spares availability from Korg. We're in the cannibalism area unless some people can get other pieces working on this legacy platform. Secondly, given the perceived gap between the Nautilus and other key manufacturers in the market, this puts the platform back in the market and means Korg have an offering that is now considered competitive. But I do have another theory. And my theory is the Korg Kronos 3 is a stepping stone. I think they have introduced it into the market to stop Korg hemorrhaging musicians from the Kronos platform to the other manufacturing platforms, which actually make very compelling arguments at the moment in terms of their capabilities. Alright, both of the other major platforms, and actually there's three I would probably say, because there has been a launch on another one recently. All of those platforms make a compelling argument why you shouldn't stick with Korg. And I think that is the reason why Kronos 3 has been released to market, is to stop that hemorrhaging. But I do believe this is a stepping stone. I believe there is another platform or another keyboard coming, but given the fact they've had to launch the Kronos 3 now, that keyboard is probably at least 18 months, 2 years away. And on that note, this has been my view of the Korg Kronos 3. Live long and prosper, and I'll see you on the next one.